Commune without really knowing what it's talking about. Now, the Commune happens in the context of really the many French revolutions. How many revolutions were there in France? Three, at least three. There were 3 official revolutions and several changes of regime, which can be called revolutions. But we start with 1789. We have the change from monarchy to republic for the first time. What follows is the First Republic, but that doesn't really work because nobody knows how to get a republic together. And so you have a young soldier, Mr. Bonaparte, who has led many successful military campaigns, comes to Paris, has himself elected president of the new republic, and then crowns himself emperor. Amazing. So 1804 you have the First Empire. Then he's overthrown 10 years later by the Russian allies. We'll hear a little bit more about them later. 1815, and what do? Bring back the king. Many people do not realise that we reinstated the monarchy in France. So the king comes back. Restoration monarchy, another revolution. 1830, what do? They change one king for another king. And they have the constitutional monarchy, the July monarchy. Then another revolution. 1848, Second Republic. And who comes along but none other than a Mr. Napoleon III, Bonaparte's nephew, who has himself elected president and crowns himself emperor in 1851. So we have the Second Empire, and that is the situation that we're in 1870 at the end of the Franco-Prussian War. Now, the situation here at this time is that nobody had had all these revolutions and all of this blood spilt in order to have an emperor, a despotic emperor. And likewise, Napoleon III's regime led to enormous wealth with the wealthy and absolute abject poverty with the poor. And that was the case very much on the streets of Paris. So you already have a situation of unrest. Then 1871, the Franco-Prussian War, so more or less France against Germany, but France against Prussia, is going very, very badly for the French. What you have up here, what you need to imagine, and we will see this as we move around, is we are absolutely at the uppermost top of the hill of Montmartre. We had nothing here at this time. In 1870, you have a flat area of ground that belonged to the church where they kept firewood and things like that. So absolutely nothing, a bit of wasteland. But what you have is a flat area of ground that has a completely open view out to the north of Paris, and it was therefore a natural fortress. And so this is what you have here during the siege of Paris of 1871. Can you see what that is?
Cannons.
Cannons. Cannons lined up towards the north in order to defend Paris. Now, this is going relatively badly, and what Napoleon does without consulting the French people, without anything even resembling a referendum, and certainly without making it public news, is he strikes a peace treaty. And in that peace treaty, in order to get the Prussians to leave Paris alone, he gave them the region of Alsace-Lorraine. That's to say, a region in the east of France. The French, the Parisians, and the people of Montmartre, who were heavily politicised, could not believe he had done that. The whole county and all the people that went with it. And so what you had was an uprising, and you had the people of Montmartre who got themselves together and called themselves the Commune of Montmartre, or the Commune of Paris, as a kind of politically active group. And when the government comes to take back these cannons, they quite simply turn them around, face them to the city of Paris, and refuse to let them go. And so what ensues is a riot during which 2 government officials were unfortunately killed. And what the government turn around and do is oppress the communards in their thousands in a very, very short-lived bloody civil war, which finishes with them being shot up against the wall of the Père Lachaise cemetery in the east of Paris. Now, this left Paris in a state of utter shock. They couldn't believe that so many lives had been lost within the period of a few days. What this eventually leads to is Napoleon being overthrown, and we have the Third Republic, which is more or less the basis of what we have today. But at this time, you had the church, who were going through a difficult period too. In about 1870, we have the Catholic revival. That's because the Pope and his political power was being challenged at this time in Rome. And so we have the Catholic Church who are pushing forward, trying to reel people back into their kind of experience of faith. And they turn around and they say, we must repent. We must repent for the blood lost at the time of the Commune, and we must build a huge expiatory church dedicated to the Holy Heart of Jesus Christ, the Sacre-Coeur. And so this is why the basilica is built. And this was not without controversy, because the people of Montmartre, the people of Paris at this time, turned around and they said, we're not sorry, we have nothing to be sorry for. This was the government who did this to us, and now it's the government putting money into this church in order to say that we're all sorry. And so it was incredibly controversial, and it took a while to build. Another picture. It took a while to build for another very, very good reason. And this can be illustrated. This is illustrated in this picture at the top here. Montmartre. I'll come back to its name because I told you it was called Mercury's Mount for a very long time. Montmartre was in fact a hill made up of gypsum. Gypsum, when it's ground down, forms a very, very fine white powder, probably the most widely used building material of all time. What is that powder? No? Plaster of Paris, exactly. 10 points. Plaster of Paris really does come from Paris, and it comes from the hill of Montmartre and the neighbouring hill of the Butte-Chaumont, which is to the northeast. And it was quarried here for hundreds of years, right from Roman times onwards. One of the areas of Montmartre is called Les Grandes Carrières, the Great Quarries, and therefore the hill was completely hollow by this time. Now, when they start building this enormous structure on top, it becomes very quickly apparent that the whole hill is giving way under the weight, and therefore they have to dig more than 80 wells underneath, which they then fill with none other than reinforced concrete, forming these pillars, and those form the foundations of the Sacre-Coeur Basilica. Architects now say that it's in fact the church holding the hill together rather than the other way around, rather than the hill holding the church up. But nonetheless, what this means is that it takes ages and ages and ages to build, and therefore it is not consecrated until 1918-1919, after the First World War, at which point it is dedicated likewise to the war dead. This is a much less controversial reason, and if you've read in your guidebooks, which I did, but the first time I came to Paris, it's called it's dedicated to the war dead of the First World War, that's exactly right. But nonetheless, it's an absolutely remarkable building, forms a very, very beautiful part of the Paris skyline. You have this astonishingly white stone. I don't know if anybody's taught you about the stone of Paris at Notre Dame or anything like that. You probably noticed that in many places throughout the city you have huge cleaning campaigns on the old monuments, and this is largely because they were clever enough to build everything out of a stone called Paris limestone, this honey-coloured stone quarried from underneath the city itself. That's why we have such a huge underground network in Paris, and it absorbs pollution and just gets blacker and blacker and blacker, so you've got to clean it all the time. Whereas they'd finally woken up to the idea of soapstone with this. This is not soapstone, soupstone, quarried from the quarries of soup, a magical stone which goes harder and turns whiter in contact with rain. And so in fact everywhere that you can see, this has never been cleaned, everywhere that's dark and dirty, it's quite simply where it's never been rained on, and for the rest it's completely self-cleaning. Anything that you find unusual about